All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
So much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. There is nothing like recorded applause to start the day. Thank you very, very much. I am excited about today's program. I'm always excited about all our shows, but today I got a reverse bat beam. You know, normally I put up the bat beam for David K. Johnston. And today, David put up the bat beam for me, and I'm so excited. If I can say that, it sounds like a kid's birthday party I'm going to. But what I mean is I'm filled with anticipation because I'm always anxious to hear from the Pulitzer Prize winner, David K. Johnston. And more to the point, he felt the need to come onto the show to talk about what's happening in Ukraine and Europe and America. So he will be here for a short time. We're going to shoehorn him in and make sure that we get a good fix of David K. Johnston. And then we'll talk about the American financial system and the way in which the system is already gamed a bit. And we have a guest who has done not only a lot of research and work as a journalist in this area, but he is a producer and creator of the Clean New Deal. He'll tell you about that. And he's also produced a TV series that continues to be viewable and really compelling. It's called The Con. So Patrick Lovell will join us. That'll be the bottom of the hour, a little bit into the second half hour. Then in the second hour, David Katz, the brilliant legal analyst, will talk about what was and what continues to be a fascinating dance that's being done at the Supreme Court level with Trump's decisions to freeze funding, to pull out of various government programs, to fire entire institutions of American government that include tens of thousands of federal workers, those workers that can be fired, those workers that cannot be fired legally. These are legal questions that have now reached, in some cases, the Supreme Court level, and David Katz will talk about that. There's also a couple of big rulings that don't have to do with dismissals at the federal level, so we'll get to all of that as the show goes on. So that legal stuff we'll do in the second hour. There is a lot happening, and we like to typically start the show with something that is not political, which is what we will do in just an instant. But first, a quick shout out. Judy Lyons, are you kidding me? A super sticker, even as we just begin, for $20?
Big shout out.
Big shout out. You know, we are a crowdfunded show, so when everybody, when the dust settles, those who are in the crowd who help with the funding, we really do thank you and try to make a big deal of your funding. And PayPal and Patreon, one of the ways that you support us, that is to say that online monthly support. And then, of course, the super stickers and super chat. Super chat from Spencer Jaffe says Elon is out of control. Yeah, well, he certainly is that. He started out of control and he continues out of control. He's been given the keys to the kingdom. It's remarkable to me. I'll just say one thing about that in 30 seconds or less. You know, we have these institutions of government, of U.S. government, and we, in the case of cabinet officials, have a process by which they are confirmed, right? They're interviewed in open congressional hearings, and then we know that there are closed-door hearings around some of the more sensitive areas the cabinet officials will be concerned with. But then Trump shows up, invites Elon Musk in. There are none of those things, no confirmation, no background checks, and he's allowed to literally change government forever. It's insane. It's absolutely absurd. And I'm really astounded that I don't hear more about it from Congress, who have had the control of what's going on in American institutions seized from them by this guy who, as I say, just happens to be the richest guy on earth. I mean, apart from that, he has no qualification. He isn't even, without government subsidies, a successful business entrepreneur. I get it. I don't want to run him down completely like he's, some derelict. But what I mean, he's obviously was part of PayPal. He's been part of the world of tech entrepreneurship has favored Elon, and he's made some tactical decisions that have been good. And they've worked for technology firms. That in no way qualifies him to run amok with a bunch of tech bros in U.S. government. It's absolutely outrageous. And the more outrageous thing is that we don't hear about it from others. I'm talking about members of Congress, Senate, House. Anyway, I said we start with
a guy with weird ideas, but I've heard it said that if America can break because of one guy, then our system was not ready to withstand.
That's the biggest bunch of bullshit. Whoever said that, that is a bullshit thing to say. It's not one guy.
It's everything.
It's like saying, well, man, if a war can start over one guy, well, it depends who the one guy is. Moron. I mean, the one. I'm not talking about Kim. Kim was quoting somebody
else.
Okay.
No,
no, it's not okay.
I bring these things up because I know it gets a reaction from you.
It absolutely is ridiculous. It's because he's been given access. Yeah. Who is that one guy? Mm-hmm. What has he been given access to? Well, America can break because of one guy. Yeah, one guy because all of you many guys aren't intervening.
Right.
It's because another guy, Trump, would go play golf after an executive order, and he gives Musk total access to everything. It's not just one guy. It's what the guy has been given access to. It's what power one person has. So the idea, that is the most hack bullshit thing I've ever heard. But that's the shit now that masquerades as insight in the new America, because some a-hole with a YouTube channel says some crap like that, and then it's repeated on my show as like, well, I've heard that, if one guy can break, this is utter crap. It makes me so fear. There's a lot at stake here. We're on the brink of war right now because you've got a reckless president, and he's got his own recklessness internationally, and he's given to this wannabe king, entrepreneur, rich dude, total access to all government institutions. It's unprecedented.
I'm not hearing Mark. I don't know why. Is everyone else hearing Mark? Sound gone.
Mark, your sound's out.
Yeah.
I'm trying to adjust the mic, but it's your sound's out no matter where it's just there.
They just cut off Mark. No, we can't have Mark cut off. No, make it not so. Oh, he's going to have to rejoin possibly. We can't hear you, Mark. You were on a roll too. Boy, it was great. Why were you yelling? But deservedly so. So he'll come out right back. But until he does, I do want to say that Sue Ann has a birthday. Happy birthday to me, she said. It is so far the highlight of her day. Yes, I just want to wish you a happy birthday, Sue Ann. I'm giving you the birthday balloons. Here they are. Yay. And let's see if we can hear Mark.
The deep state, dude.
Thank you.
The deep state. It's when was I cut off?
I don't know, but you were on a real tear.
Well, you don't know when I was cut off? What, you weren't listening to me?
You were yelling, and
I
you were
I was yelling.
agitated.
Why are you yelling?
All right.
I've done it again.
I'm moving on.
I said something that really set you off.
Jesus Christ, I do a whole big thing. God, I tell you, Matt, welcome to the show. Matt is our newest team member. Matt.
Hi, Matt.
When my brilliance is silenced by the kind of technical screw-up like that, Matt, you can understand how it would be frustrating to a man like myself, can't you?
Why are you yelling?
Yes.
Absolutely.
That was very frustrating.
Why are you yelling?
God.
Why are you yelling?
All right, settle down. I usually start, I was saying, with something that's not political or Musk-related. Then we got that super chat, and that totally sent me off in that direction, and then I was cut off. If you could, if you enjoyed those Veritas comments, then good for you. I'm going to, I'm just reaching over here. David K. Johnston joins in just a second. I wanted to tell you one thing that's not politically related, but is related to an email we got yesterday. We got an email from someone from Brisbane, Australia, and they're waiting on a serious hurricane there. They call them cyclones, in that part of the world. And this cyclone is, I guess, forcing the redirection of cruise ships in the area. So the Carnival and Royal Caribbean cruise ships got word that their weekend getaway is now not going to be so getaway. One cruise port won't be happening as a severe weather system shuts down everything in its path. A rare Category 2 tropical cyclone taking aim at Australia's southeastern coast. For the first time in many years, Brisbane is being directly impacted by this cyclone. So our listener viewer in Brisbane, who referenced this in the email to us, is not alone. In fact, joined by these cruise ship passengers, and landfall expected today. And today has already happened over there, right? So, I'm sorry, landfall is expected today, because today is Friday there, and Friday is when landfall is expected. Anyway, more to the point, the Carnival Luminosa, the Royal Caribbean Quantum, home ports in Brisbane, they're stuck at sea until the port can safely reopen. So imagine you're on a cruise ship and you're now going to be remaining on the cruise ship until the cyclone passes.
A lot of interesting answers to how was your vacation?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
the last time I remember a cruise ship and people being stranded on it was what? Does anybody recall the real terror?
Was it COVID?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
COVID.
right
That's
outside
exactly
San Francisco.
Right.
Right.
That's right, COVID, right outside of San Francisco. It was in the port of Oakland, I believe. But anyway, that's the very latest on that. Will you let me know when David K. Johnston gets here? I think I see him.
He's here. He's here.
Okay, all right. So anyway, that's the word on that, to give you a little something that's not pure politics. The cyclone and what's happening to our friends in Australia. There is 279 for my intense speech. I know I was cut off by, I thought I could stick the landing, but as it turned out, I didn't have a chance to stick the landing. So, all right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This guy's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's the co-founder of DCReport.org. Now he's a professor at RIT, in Rochester Institute of Technology. He's the great David K. Johnston, everybody.
Hello, Mark.
Hello, sir. So, talk to me about Ukraine. Things are changing so rapidly there.
Yeah, there's some really important developments today. This morning, Reuters broke the story that Donald Trump plans to kick out 240,000 Ukrainian refugees, mostly women and children, we let into the country because of the invasion by the Russians. This was done during the Biden administration. Of course, to Donald Trump, Biden's the worst president ever, and anything he did has to be terrible, except creating jobs Donald wants to claim credit for. This plan will take a while, but it's indicative of what I think is now crystal clear, that Donald Trump is favoring Russia and trying to help Russia defeat Ukraine. Day before yesterday, Donald stopped the sharing of intelligence information with the Ukrainian military. Having U.S. intelligence has been crucial to the Ukrainians' successes. And to give an idea of what's going on in this war, Russia has been losing 1,100 to 1,600 soldiers a day. And I don't mean casualties, I mean killed in action. During World War II, America, fighting wars in 2 theaters, lost an average of 300 soldiers a day. The Russians in the last year have had 400,000 soldiers killed, and they have gained some territory, as critics of the war keep saying. And what they've gained is 0.5% of the territory of Ukraine. Virtually nothing for that many lives. The other significant development about Ukraine is that the Australian newspapers, the newspapers of record in Australia, the Sydney Morning Herald and its sister paper, The Age in Melbourne, they have a very sharp international editor by the name of Peter Harcher. And today he said flat out that there shouldn't be any more question that Donald Trump is an agent of Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin. And the evidence he offered of this is that not only has Donald used Russian propaganda talking points, and not only does everything he says is needed to have peace in Ukraine be what Vladimir Putin wants, but he notes that throughout the 4 years Biden was president, Donald, by his own account, was having telephone conversations with Putin, and that all of the countries Donald Trump has verbally attacked or threatened have in common that they are democracies that had been aligned with America against Russia: Canada, Denmark, Panama, and the semi-autonomous Greenland. And in a podcast, he provided, I thought, a lot more examples to justify this point. So I'm no longer the one journalist out there saying Donald is an asset for sure and arguably an agent of the Kremlin. And I think Harker makes a very solid argument to that effect. So think about this for a minute now. The United States of America, a beacon of liberty and democracy since 1787, has now completely abandoned that and has taken the side of a murderous dictator, the modern czar, against liberty and freedom, and right to the point of kicking out of our country the refugees we took in after Vladimir Putin 3 years ago attacked Ukraine.
It's a remarkable transition. It's a remarkable pivot. This from Vilma. Trump has also threatened the UK not to share intelligence with the Ukrainians. Any good news about the Ukrainians at all? So he's leaning on allies, traditional allies, not to fill the gaps that America is now leaving.
Right. And there's a program called Five Eyes: the United States, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, and Australia, where we do global signals intelligence, or SIGNET. I've been to Australia, where there is this place called Pine Gap. You can't get to it. You can see the signs that say Pine Gap, but it's a giant valley with this enormous array of electronic surveillance equipment to pick up signals in the air, to bounce things from satellites, and that is run in close cooperation with us. Australia has been our most loyal ally ever since World War II, more so than the Canadians and the Brits. Absolute lapdog. When we say jump, they don't even ask how high. They just jump as high as they can. So for a very sober publication, or two publications, because there's a lot of rivalry between Sydney and Melbourne, to adopt the position that was put out today by Peter Harcher is an important development about what's happening in the rest of the world. I've been interviewed a couple of times now by overseas journalists, all from Europe. And the core of their questions is, what in the world is happening? And are we in danger of attack by the United States if this keeps going? Now, think about that. That journalists in Europe are starting to ask the question, might the United States, presumably in partnership with Russia at some point, engage in attacks on Europe because of Donald Trump? And Americans aren't seeing this. It's not being discussed in our best newspapers. The fact check by the New York Times, where I worked for many years and is, flaws and all, the best newspaper in the world. The fact check on his address to Congress was very namby-pamby and wishy-washy. He made some remark and the Times said, well, no evidence to support it. Another one, well, it's unclear. Nonsense. He made stuff up. He said $350 billion spent by Americans on the Ukraine war. It's $120 billion, a third of that. Said millions and millions of people who are obviously dead, 115 years and older, are getting Social Security. No, they're not. That's a very inexpensive software fraud prevention tool. If you're over 115, you can't get Social Security unless you show up and prove to Social Security you're still alive.
Yeah, it's the coded. It's the coded
it's just
way.
Coding in the software.
Right.
Yeah. So no checks go out if your birth date is before a certain point. And his speech was just lie after dissembling, after misleading statement, after inflated number, after utter nonsense. And at the beginning of his talk, he said, "I have restored free speech in America." And then later in the show, and it was a show. Absolutely. He says, we vanquished woke and DEI and stopped that. Well, then there isn't free speech.
Yeah, well, and I think the co-conspirators in the room, who applaud his every utterance, I think are, they're MIA when it comes to essentially the dismantling of government. I was saying that before you came on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's not just the one guy, Musk or Trump. There are systems in place, but if those systems aren't used, then there's nothing to communicate. This is from Don. I hope the Euros use the frozen Russian assets to arm Ukraine. I thought this is an important point. Maybe they won't need our help. Screw Putin, he says. But what about that? There is a lot. There's a lot of money.
The European journalists, Mark, have been asking me about exactly that, and I've said I don't see any reason for you to hold back. You've got all these frozen Russian assets. Donald Trump is in the process of removing the sanctions we had put on Russia. So yeah, you should right now seize all that money and give it to Ukraine. And the basic choice I think Europeans face is Putin needs this help on his side. He has lost so many soldiers. He's sending soldiers to the front who have no training except how to clean and fire their rifle. There's a new video footage got out last night or this morning of Russian soldiers just running when they encountered a Ukrainian unit. On the other hand, the Ukrainians can't make these strikes into Russia without the help of the United States. I expect that Elon Musk will, if he hasn't already, turn off Starlink, his private U.S. taxpayer-financed satellite communications system. He did it before helping Russia.
Right. That was what the USAID investigation was all about. That's why he went against USAID initially.
Right. So, I think the Europeans recognize in the short run, if Ukraine is defeated, they're not at risk because without a single American firing a shot or dying, a single American soldier, there's some volunteers who've gone over, we have destroyed well more than half of Russia's war-making capacity. You fight a war, you need big, heavy trucks to bring things to the front. He has about 1/6 at the best, more likely 1/10 of the heavy trucks he needs, and they're so old they break down. They can't carry full loads. Putin is at the moment he's getting nowhere of any significance. It's also mud season coming up, so there won't be much movement one way or the other. But if the United States was resolute, Putin could be pushed back off of Russian territory and we could get an end to this. But that's not what's happening. Donald Trump is clearly intervening against the Ukrainian peoples in favor of this murderous dictator. In the journalists I've talked to and the TV shows I've been doing overseas, people are they're very shocked by this, even if they think a lot of what Trump's doing may be good stuff. But the Europeans in particular are worried, as the Canadians are. Remember, I talked in your show earlier that 11 of the Canadian premiers, governors, came to Capitol Hill week before last, and they were asking, is the U.S. going to invade Canada again? We haven't done it since 1812, but we've done it several times. That was the most recent. And they're really worried about it. Justin Trudeau has made it clear he is worried about that. And if you listen carefully to the joint congressional talk, Trump indicated he may seize Greenland. He talked about, we want you to be independent, and he said, but we need to have Greenland. And he made it clear that seizing the Panama Canal is still on his agenda.
Yeah. I mean, in the case of Canada, this is unprovoked. Well, in the case of all of these various confrontations that the Trump administration is having, these are unprovoked confrontations. I mean, it's, the Canadians didn't do anything to produce this kind of vile reaction on the part of the Americans. I wanted to ask you before, I have a journalist and journalism question that relates to the White House and White House coverage that I'll get to in a second, just while I have you. But before I do, Denmark now is introducing a strategy to expedite and economize weapon supplies to Ukraine by facilitating local manufacturing within their country. It's called the Danish model. They've raised over $550 million in their first year, and they expect $1 billion this year. This would allow Ukraine to quickly produce and maintain its equipment and enhance defense capabilities, I'm seeing here, amid concerns over U.S. reliability and the Russian threat. So Denmark is offering, as Europe is, to fill that gap that we were talking about.
Tiny a country as Denmark is, about 5-6 million people. It's a key player in this because of their resolve and their horrible experience under the Nazis. And I think that we're going to find that Poland, Denmark, Germany, France, and England are going to be the key players here. None of them has a military large enough and well equipped enough to go into the battlefield, and we don't want to have them in the battlefield with a nuclear power on the other side. What we want to do, I believe, is what we've been doing, and that is helping the Ukrainians who have shown remarkable brilliance in military strategy, fighting this war on the cheap. I mean, this will be studied in war colleges around the world 500 years from now, how they did this, no matter how the war turns out. And the problem is that the really killer weapons, and I mean literally killer weapons, have come from our country. The HIMARS artillery and the ATACMS missiles, which are incredibly accurate and lethal. And they will run through their supply of those. The HIMARS have to be refitted and refurbished after a certain number of firings. So the weaponry they can get from Europe, it will not be as lethal. On the other hand, it's probably better than what the Russians have. The Russians are getting their weaponry from North Korea, and we know that a lot of that's been junk, the mortar duds that go in all directions and don't calibrate as they're supposed to, from Iran, because the United States, in an act of idiocy going back almost 71 years, 1954, has managed to turn 1,000 years of enmity between Iran and Russia into making them partners. And but getting weaponry from the European countries, including helicopters, heavy trucks, and guns and bullets, and electronic surveillance, is just going to be fundamentally essential to fill in for the United States. And what some of the Europeans are thinking is, gee, does that mean Trump will do something to us if we stand up? And the fact that we know the Trump White House has threatened the Danes, you can reasonably conclude from that they've probably had tough conversations with the French and the Germans, the Brits, and perhaps Poland about, don't you dare go help the Ukrainians.
Yeah, and I think that's precisely the kind of attitude and disposition that Trump has toward these things. He takes everything so personally. You see it even in the tariffs and the back and forth on that. So you're right. I mean, they're right to be concerned. It seems odd that you'd have to have that anxiety associated with just the kind of the personal ego that's associated with a lot of these moves on the part of Trump. But there's the Russian asset part, and then there is the kind of broken, bruised ego part of Trump that you have to account for.
Right.
So
before I go, one other thing. Coachella Valley coffee is very good. I was very surprised. Thank you for the package.
We sent David the Coachella Valley coffee, which is pretty terrific. Well, I have one other substantive question, and then we'll go off on a sip of the coffee together. But in the Zelensky-Trump meeting, there was that completely inappropriate question that was directed toward Zelensky by a reporter who was there. And this guy, Brian Glenn, he was the guy who asked Zelensky why he wasn't wearing a suit. I mean, even as, Churchill during World War II didn't wear a suit. There's this idea that because I'm with my men and women, my people who are fighting this battle. So the White House took this question from this new reporter. He's the one who asked that question. As it turns out, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, which is,
or boyfriend du jour, apparently, based on her recent history.
Yeah.
And I believe he was accredited as a reporter for TASS, but maybe that was someone else. The news reports I saw were a little unclear about that.
Well, what he is, I think, is a reporter compensated by our government. Apparently, he works for a news outlet, this is in quotes, that has taken $192,000 from Donald Trump's political committees. He's paid
Okay.
by Donald
All right.
Trump's PAC for almost $200,000 so far.
Thank you. I wasn't able to find a clear news account that I trusted about what happened there. So I appreciate that. This is very strange given how they have complained, that Politico has gotten money and Reuters and some others, and they're for subscriptions to the publications. And we have, even if they're going to get rid of regulators, the reality is that if you're the Internal Revenue Service, you really have to have a lot of people who read Tax Notes, which is a nonprofit, no ads magazine I used to be a columnist for. If you're covering banking, you've got to have subscriptions to the American Banker to know what the bankers are up to. And those aren't cheap. Trade journals are very expensive. Some of them cost $15,000 a year, and one subscription for an agency with 60,000 people, that doesn't work. You got to have a bunch of them. And that's all that's happening. These are paid subscriptions to information regulators need. But we shouldn't be surprised that Donald Trump's people have planted a propagandist posing as a journalist who's on the payroll of a Trump-affiliated organization. And of course, to Donald, there'd be nothing wrong with that because he's with him. If it was somebody paid by the Democrats, he'd be screaming bloody murder.
Yeah, and I also think that, and you kind of alluded to this when you were talking about Trump's remarks before Congress. He's about the show. He's a performer. So,
Yeah.
Of course, that guy's a prop because I'm trying to make a point and
Right.
I'm trying to run down Zelensky. And so that's why that guy's there. So I get it. He's not a real journalist, but he still serves our message.
One of the things about that meeting with Zelensky, you'll remember he was asked about, why aren't you wearing a suit? Nobody asked that about Elon Musk when he had his 4-year-old with him. But what you saw there was classic Marxist-Leninist denunciation and humiliation. If you watch the Netflix TV series, The Three-Body Problem, which is from a novel published in China, I'm very surprised that Beijing allowed the novel to be published. They wouldn't allow my books to be translated in China. It opens up with a physics professor during Mao's Cultural Revolution having to wear a dunce cap and being denounced and then beaten to death. I haven't ruined the show for you folks. Trust me. It's just the opening scene.
That happens in Act 1, man.
But yeah, it's the very first thing you see, and it becomes an important motivating factor in what happens as we discover an alien life group that are much advanced on us, and they're coming towards us, and it's going to take them 400 years to get here. And it is a fundamental tenet of the practical application of Marxist-Leninist dictatorial theory that you must humiliate and denounce people who are not in complete obedience to you. And it was Harcher from The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald who brought this to my attention when I listened to his podcast. But he's quite right. At the time I saw this, I thought this is an ambush and it's humiliation. And there's some other goal here. And what I hadn't thought is, well, yeah, that's what Marxist-Leninists do. And it raises the question of Donald, with all of those phone calls no one was on who wasn't an American, and his meetings while president with Russians in the Oval Office that he didn't announce, where we know he gave away vital national security secrets, his one-on-one meetings or one American and a whole bunch of Russians meetings while he was president with Putin. All of those suggest that I don't think Donald is a dedicated Marxist-Leninist. He's not smart enough to be able to do that. But could they have said to him, well, you need to humiliate your opponent. You can't just disagree with him. You must denounce and humiliate. That's not hard to learn. Donald would get that. And that's what you saw happen in the Oval Office, a classic Marxist-Leninist dictatorial move.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be on board with the political philosophy or even understand
Right.
it. He that humiliation thing, that's right out of. You've got a bunch of examples of him doing that, through his career.
Sure.
This is part of his game. David, love that we had this special visit with you, and I look forward to Tuesday. David K. Johnston, everybody.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Wild to hear David talking about the Coachella Valley coffee, everybody. That's a designated David K. Johnston, now Coachella Valley coffee break. I am drinking it from one of our mugs, one of our new mugs. This is the We Could Try Ignoring It, Sir mug, which is, you can see it. We have phrases from the show. that are on the various.
We could try ignoring it, sir.
And the stains of dripped coffee on my well-used mug. But we sent a bunch to David K. Johnston, and I love that he loves it. You'll love it too. Again, we had it up there for you. It's all organic coffee. It's sourced from sustainable farms. Coachella Valley Coffee involved in seeding with money, a lot of women-owned businesses, because they find that the women use the money to actually build the business. They've done it with guys, and men tend to let the money get away, and they just haven't as much success. So these are all women-owned farms, Latin America, Africa, and these are some of the best beans on earth. This is a boutique roastery, hand-roasted coffee. And you should know they support this show, and I love them for supporting the show, but that's not the reason. I've been drinking their coffee for years, and then they came on board, and I'm so excited they are part of the show now. So when you go there, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, do check them out. And as you can see, use the discount code MARKT at checkout. You'll get 10% off. So again, tea, coffee, any number of things, merch, anything you buy there, you will get 10% off at checkout if you use the discount code MARKT. And you too will enjoy the wonderful Coachella Valley Coffee taste experience, which I shall. It's very, very good. That's very, very good. That's all I'll say. You won't be disappointed. Look, David K. Johnston. I mean, even, this is a guy, he doesn't have to mention anything, right? I mean, he's a Pulitzer Prize winner. And what does he do? He breaks up his visit with us to talk about how good the coffee is. So, I'm just saying.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, everyone. Thank you for being here. It is a Thursday, a very busy one at that. And I expect that we'll get into any number of things with David Katz related to Supreme Court decisions and even the positioning of the Trump administration to discharge so many federal employees. I mean, there are plans to cut 80,000 employees from the Veterans Affairs institution that handles that which we supposedly are so concerned with, which is, taking care of our veterans. We're going to get to David Katz on that and much, much more. So if you have a legal question, please note it to us in the chat, and we will try to work it in with the great David Katz who joins us in the next hour. Now, this guy's a producer. He's a creator of the Clean New Deal, and his personal story is a fascinating one because he lost his house and really was on the brink of losing his family in the financial crisis of 2008. And he created a TV series called The Con, which lays bare a lot of the details and a lot of the facets of that free fall that we all experienced in 2008. But he didn't stop there. He's continuing to expose and discuss things related to government and the financial system. And as I say, he is working on a new project called the Clean New Deal. We'll ask him about that. Now, Patrick Lovell, everybody. Hi, Patrick.
Hey, David, it's really, Mark, sorry. Mark, it is really great to see you.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. With so much going on, it's a fire hose of crisis, it seems, overseas with Ukraine, domestically with the discharge of so many federal workers, with the kind of adversarial relationship that government now has openly with states that, dare defy him, and with a Supreme Court that appears disposed to execute a lot of his policies, and certainly policies that reflect the Christian right in America. I mean, these are all the things that are going on. So it's against this backdrop that your stuff, I think, really stands out because it still follows some of the fundamental flaws and fundamental gaming of the system that's going on Wall Street and with the American economy. That's why I loved the name, The Con, that was going. That's what your series is called. So speak to me about some of the research that you're doing now.
Well, I just want to pick up on something that David K. dropped in your last segment. Briefly, the scandal behind the three-body problem was kind of sort of an inside pool look at how power of the billionaire class works worldwide. I don't know if you are aware of this, but the producer of Three Body Problem for the deal on Netflix was murdered by his attorney because of the deal gone sour. But it's this inside pool of these power matrices that are holding on to very valuable information that they can use at their disposal. And to David K's point, it's fascinating that China let that go through, given the analogy that he said. But in context to your question and what's going on.
Hang on a second, just because people who may not have seen David K. Johnston, because we're going to drop this as a separate video. Just to explain, that was the book, The Three Body Problem, that was then turned into a movie. Isn't that what you're referring to?
That's correct.
Okay.
But within his analogy, he was talking about Putin and all of the things that everybody's trying to kind of get their heads around. And you have been in, obviously the last couple of weeks, particularly on the flip side of Doge, specifically as it relates to all things Ukraine and Putin, right? There's this power behind the power and what exactly is going on. Although we're looking at this in a kind of a shock and awe sort of scenario where it's like, okay, we were aware of Project 2025. We had a sense that Donald Trump was going to be a dictator on day one, but that didn't mean that we thought the entirety of the federal government was going to be purged within a matter of weeks, led by the inside pool of the world's richest man that is now using that leverage to basically squeeze blood from a turnip from situations that help the most vulnerable in society, not to mention government employees that are actually regulators.
Yeah, you're talking about USAID, you're talking about Medicaid, you're talking about all of these various institutions.
Right, that are there to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse, right? And so
correct.
the federal government is obviously a very large institution, but what people need to understand, based on what I'm here to discuss, is that this has been going on for decades. This is just the final piece of a puzzle that has been made possible by literally decades of this activity that follows almost exactly parallel of what's taken place since the 80s, quite frankly, okay? So just really quickly, for example, we just saw Elon Musk stand in front of the world with a chainsaw to basically demonstrate that he was going to cut through the bureaucratic red tape to, of course, through what Doge's declared mission is to rid itself of, and it's funny that you put that picture versus his nerd Nazi salute. But the long and the short of it is that image was an exact replica that he plagiarized from a gentleman by the name of Chainsaw Gillerin that took place during the Clinton administration when there was a reinventing government initiative that led to what we call the 3Ds: deregulation, desupervision, and decriminalization. Now, interestingly enough, there is a meme that's floating around on X right now that says nobody is talking about the 330,000 federal government employees that the Clinton administration got rid of in context to what we're seeing now with Doge. And ironically, that's a pretty accurate depiction. But what you need to understand and what the people need to understand is we seem to be on our heels, surprised that this is all happening. But I've been in the midst of this battle in the trenches since the release of our work, The Con, which we've made available for free at www.thecon.tv, which is the blueprint for what's been going on literally for the last 4 decades that blew up specifically with the 2009 great financial crisis that will go into led to an event that nobody's aware of that made this moment possible now that everybody's trying to get their heads around. How in the world is it possible that billionaires could completely hijack the federal government and our democracy?
Well, I think it's worth visiting some of the elements that led to us today. I mean, you've alluded to a couple of them, and I get that you want people to watch The Con and also be part of the Clean New Deal. As that, when does the Clean New Deal come? The Clean New Deal is now
ongoing. It's ongoing.
It's ongoing, exactly.
Yeah. So let me give you an example here. I mean, and I know
because you talk about what led to this, and these billionaires openly, essentially taking control of government. We've always, I've made the point here before, as you know, we've always had this essential oligarchical control of government. The Supreme Court has permitted it with rulings that allow for the corporate buying of politics, et cetera. But what we've never seen before is this kind of access granted to a guy completely outside of government, knows nothing about government, has had no history of civil service or even public service, and he goes in and he essentially is dismantling government right now as Elon Musk. How did we get to this place?
Well, interestingly, again, because of what we revealed to you both as a kind of an intersection between the con and then ultimately the Clean New Deal. The question that you asked is, how is it possible that a billionaire could be a de facto president, given everything that we think that the law can prevent? But what we don't recognize, and that you alluded to, was that the war was literally lost during the decision of the Supreme Court when they effectively etch-a-sketched American history by determining that the 14th Amendment, Section 3, was not applicable in the Colorado case that went to the Supreme Court to keep Trump off the ballot, for example.
Yeah, that's the decision that stipulated that Trump was behind an insurrection. Insurrectionists are not available or not eligible to be president of the United States.
It says it in black and white. That was written right after, obviously, the Civil War. And Lawrence Tribe, the professor emeritus of law at Harvard University, had been saying at that time period, this is completely unconstitutional. But the reaction from the American public was at best muted, right? But here we are, fast forward to the situation where we knew about, Project 2025, and we knew what, at least viewers of your show know, because you feature David K. Johnston frequently, who's laid out that Donald Trump has been breaking the law for the past 4 decades and never held accountable. Now, what you find in the con is the blueprint for ultimately the game that Donald Trump has been playing for decades, that David K. Johnston has, shown us that he should have been held accountable by prosecutors or DAs that chose not to do their job. Why didn't they want to do their job? I guess because, like Jesse Eisinger said in his prolific book, The Chicken Shit Club, they didn't want to lose. That's the problem when you have the law that doesn't want to battle entrenched interests that have incredible attorneys that work for billionaires. It's very difficult to get convictions because of the legal process. That's one. But two, ultimately, what people, and this is going to be a shortcut because we don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but what I want to demonstrate to the American people and what people need to wrap their heads around is the ultimate whodunit and how this is all possible. Look, the billionaire class was given tens of trillions of dollars illegally following the 2008 financial crisis, and it never ended. There was a workaround, and people are talking about it now. They're trying to suss out, well, and this actually, there was a federal judge this morning that had ruled that the White House was going above Congress because of what Congress has budgeted, because Congress has the power of the purse. But the big smoke and mirrors that everybody needs to wrap their head around was following the great financial crisis, which was the world's largest racketeering conspiracy in the financial conspiracy in the history of the world, that involved tens of millions of felonies, that was not held to account, that the Federal Reserve backdoored tens of trillions of dollars illegally to the billionaire class and the billionaire apparatus. So what do I mean by that? That's our financial system. So is Elon Musk a standalone? No. There's a lot of things involved, whether it's private equity, too big to fail banks, hedge funds, et cetera, et cetera. But we floated the entirety of this massive racketeering scheme, which was just simply everything the federal government has been indicting Donald Trump on in his 91 indictments that led to 34 felony convictions that proved that they couldn't circle the wagons on one guy, let alone the entire financial system. So the ultimate.
Well, we all saw the way the financial system was let off the hook after the '08 crash.
No-
No one was
no
held
criminal
responsible. No
conviction.
one went to prison. No one was even charged. The quantitative easing program, yeah, zero sum. That's exactly right. I mean, yeah. So we always known that billionaires and the billionaire class, as you call them and appropriately call them, they've always benefited the most from the aspects of government that are there to both take care of them and bail them out in the case of the '08 crash.
Which
right?
is called socialism for the
Yeah,
rich.
exactly. It's
But-
socialism for the
but
rich.
this is-
It's
but it
true.
was done, Mark, illegally, and that's the key consideration here. Okay, so what is the con? The con is what the federal government actually says in all of these settlements that that happened with the too big to fail banks. So everything that Eric Holder professed, which is you have to read between the lines and you have to understand the law and you have to understand what was done and what was not done, but basically reiterated everything that I show you in the con, which I got from David K. Johnston's colleague, a gentleman by the name of William K. Black, who's the top criminologist in the country, and he took out 1,700 high-level bank executives in the S&L crisis, which is where all of this stuff begins. Exactly for Trump, by the way. His entire career in Atlantic City and the stuff that David K. Johnston has revealed on your show and to me as well, all started as kind of hatched in that environment, as well as what was going on in his development deals in Manhattan that went on for literally decades, right? But that's a microcosm of what I'm revealing to you. But now let's fast forward to where we are. After the joint session of Congress where Trump did a kind of State of the Union, which wasn't a State of the Union, but the mammoth lies that we saw, basically unchallenged, minus, Al Green, etc., got to a point where this is what happens when the rule of law has completely been decimated. The pirates have taken over the government. Why? Because the rule of law has effectively failed for the last 14 years in context to what we're revealing. So the last thing that
just bring some focus to that, because I think that's a really crucial point. The rule of law as it pertains to fill in the blank, if you would.
Absolutely. So again, like I revealed just a moment ago, that there were 91 indictments by all of these federal agencies, whether it was at the DOJ, late as it was through Merrick Garland's Jack Smith investigation and all things what happened down in West Palm Beach because of the stolen documents. But then also the things that happened within Letitia James' case, not to mention Fonnie Willis, so on and
So you're saying the justice system has let us down just in relation to Donald Trump and the lawlessness associated with everything he did. This isn't even concerning everything else we were just talking about.
But this is the key consideration, Mark. The government had proven that the way they developed these cases, and this is a shortcut, okay, that Donald Trump defrauded the United States basically using deceptive acts and practices, racketeering, falsification of business records, as well as forgeries to steal the Electoral College in a nutshell, and that doesn't deal with whatever took place down in Mar-a-Lago because of the documents that came out of the Library of Congress, et cetera, based on what he was selling. But that in a nutshell is what the federal government was pursuing before he slipped everything from the insurrection forward and then got, because of the corruption in the Supreme Court, basically, elevated to the level of king, right? He's above the law. What I'm revealing to you is that's exactly what we didn't do to the financial system that did the exact same thing, only with tens of millions of cases that then led to tens of trillions of dollars being unleashed illegally to float the system, to put this billionaire apparatus above the law and above market forces, which is what? Two things. It's either an aristocracy, which is tyranny, which of course our country was born in our revolution, but it's also, and this is the total, like, are you kidding me? Considering, the satire that we see on a daily basis. It's socialism. It's socialism for the criminal class. And we have a plan to move that in the direction that nobody else is even coming close to. And I just want to say this really quick, because I don't know how much time we have left.
Yeah, we only have another minute or so go ahead.
Okay, just very quickly. Following Trump's speech the other night, Bernie Sanders took it upon himself to have his own response. Of course, that wasn't sanctioned by the Democratic Party, who sanctioned the Michigan, junior senator who came out of the CIA. Really? So that was really
Well,
fascinating to me.
it was a tepid response. She did the best she could, but Bernie was brilliant. I thought, and we played some of Bernie on this show.
Okay,
Yeah.
Bernie was brilliant, but see, here's the thing that I really want you and I want your audience to understand. Bernie has been saying the same thing for the last 14 years.
I
My
agree with
first
that.
documentary film, I put Bernie at the end of my film, who basically said the exact same thing on Congress 14 years ago after the Occupy Wall Street movement, and he speaks in platitudes, okay? He doesn't provide the details that I'm providing you, all of which are in www.thecleannewdeal.org. And I'll just finish with this, excuse me, Mark. We had a populist movement that started after the Civil War, that went through the Great Depression of the late 1890s, that led into what created the Federal Reserve. All of these lessons were learned that led to the progressive movements that created trust busting all the way through the New Deal. Okay. And a shortcut to that is what Biden said on his exit from the presidency was, we are now an oligarchy. And surprise, I've been involved with it for 50 years, but now it's up to the American people to do something because we've done it before. Nobody has the details of what I'm providing, but we do know how to move this thing forward. And that is the clean new deal. Because the final question that I'll ask you, David, is there a better way to spend $71 trillion than on a tiny, tiny percentage of the billionaire class, given all the things that the United States government is responsible for?
Yeah, I mean, it's an obscenity what's happened. I mean, it's an obscenity how our money has been offloaded to this billionaire class. And as to Bernie Sanders, I think he calls this out, and perhaps you're right. He has been saying the same thing on some level. I think it's something of a cry in the night because he's swimming upstream against a lot of forces. You can say, I guess all I'd say in the case of Bernie Sanders is you can put it in the category of platitudes, and maybe that's a fair category to put it in. I guess I'm glad somebody is at least sending that message. I mean, I see it. It's such a refreshing thing to hear from a legislator. You just don't hear it, but that it's not going far enough. Of course, you're right. I mean, it's a
Bernie Sanders, his economic advisor was a woman by the name of Stephanie Kelton. She worked closely with my mentor on this whole project. That was the guy I mentioned before, William K. Black. William K. Black is the Michael Jordan of criminology, probably the greatest the United States has ever built. Again, he put 1,700 white-collar elite executives in prison because of the savings and loan crisis, which was Act One in this incredible tragic opera that we're now in probably the closing curtain call, okay? But in the 2016 debate in Brooklyn, Bernie Sanders made this incredible proclamation. He said, Wall Street's business model is fraud. What is fraud? Hillary Clinton defined it as shenanigans. No, fraud is illegal theft by deception that has different criminal convictions or remedies depending on the degree of the felony. In the case of the most comprehensive version of it, it's called RICO, racketeering, influence, corrupt organization. That's what we used to do to take down organized crime. Ironically, that Rudolph Giuliani was in the midst of back in the 70s with the 5 families of New York. But what I am revealing to you is the details of everything the Department of Justice has actually said between the lines, as well as the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission, and so much that has happened since. But what you have to understand is the revolving door enables this professional class corruption that has completely eroded our democracy's ability to hold organized crime to account. And what we're revealing to you is who did what, when, and how, what's happened literally over the last 14 years, and what we, the people, must do to collectively come together by literally, Mark, the millions. Because I don't think we're ever going to see a free and fair election again unless we, the people, find a way through this, and that's the Clean New Deal at www.thecleannewdeal.org.
Yeah, I agree with so much of what you've said. And again, here's a pro tip. You don't need to say www anymore. Just say thecleannewdeal.org. And that's what I'm going to say. Thecleannewdeal.org. www is so 1990 something. So don't worry about it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. The cleannewdeal.org. Learn more. Patrick Lovell, you know so much. It's humbling sometimes to listen to you. Your references can be so esoteric, and I appreciate this conversation. Let's do it again. All right,
We
my
the,
friend.
we the people can defeat corruption if we unify around the truth.
All the best. Thanks, Patrick Lovell. Everybody, cleannewdeal.org. Yeah, he's doing the hard work, but he's saying that it's all I could think of while Patrick was talking was
all there, black and white, clear as crystal.
yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what I was thinking the whole time. It is all there, black and white, clear as crystal. So thanks to Patrick Lovell. All right, so
The Mark Thompson Show.
well, if you've missed any of the show today, you've missed a real great one. Go back and check it out. We'll drop the videos. You can subscribe to this show and hit the little bell, the notification bell. And when we drop a video, you'll find out about it. And we'll break out a couple of the things from today. Obviously, David K. Johnston, Patrick, David Katz is coming up. We'll drop them as separate videos. And if we can, I don't know if we can pull together that rant I had at the beginning. Kim lit a fire under me because she quoted some guy that she'd seen or heard, and I went off. And of course, the tech bugs blew me out because I was on a roll.
It was weird because you were like right at the height of it and you got zapped out.
Oh man, I was, and
it
I
makes
tell
me
you, it
think
was one of those
someone
things
was doing it on purpose.
Yeah, like if you have a anybody ski anymore? Is everybody a snowboarder? Like I'm a skier. I haven't skied in a long time. When you've got a really great ski run going, you just know it's going. You know, you are hitting it. That's the way I felt about that run because I was so angry about that notion that had been offered, and yet then I wiped out like so many ski runs. So I was wiped out by something else. I mean, I continued,
through no fault of your own.
Kim, I'm wondering what to do. You know, we have Matt on board today, everybody. Matt is our newest member of the team. Yeah. Matt has been great. I mean, we've really been dropped into this world. He's been dropped into this world where we have all this stuff, and he had no time to kind of learn the systems, and he's done really well. So bravo, Matt.
Jumped in and did it.
Yeah. Really, really good. So we've also had, Matt is so chill, says Sea-Dog. Shout out to Matt, so chill. We love chill, baby. You got to get chilled around here. Yeah. Good job, Matt, says Just Give Me the Truth. Just Give Me the Truth had something else that was really good. I think I put it off to the side. That was the Three Body. Yeah. The Chinese series of Three Body was very critical of the Chinese Communist Party Cultural Revolution. Seems like China may be more open than we are. Wow. I mean, it is scary that, free speech, something that we proudly talk about in this country, and it's one of these freedoms that we, parade around to the rest of the world. I always love that brag that we have, which is, well, in this country, we can, we're free to do this. We're free to worship what we want. We're free to say what we want. Are we? Are we? First of all, have you been to the other countries? I mean, you say that in kind of total denial of how free Canadians are, or how free Mexicans are, or how free the Danes are, or how free, etc. You go to France, you go across Europe, much of Asia, you can still say a lot of what you want to say. But the free speech power of America is something we've led the parade with for a long time, and it does feel as though, as so many other things are threatened, that may be threatened as well. So, this from Ryan with 10 euros. Thank you for the super chat. Well, the military-industrial complex already runs our armed forces. Might as well privatize it and make it official. You're right. The military-industrial complex really has completely populated our military and armed forces to the point that there is almost an exchange between the two. That is to say, generals who are retired go into the defense contract world, and defense contractors move in and out. I mean, look at even Esper, who was part of Trump's administration. He was working for Raytheon, I think, prior to that. So in your comment, I think there is a lot of truth. The soaking of the taxpayer, which is what is going on, I mean, that is the big game here. Make no mistake. the taxpayers are being totally ripped off by Musk and by the billionaire class that has now infiltrated the White House and government. We've never had a cabinet as wealthy as we have now. There is no member of this team that isn't representing that billionaire class. So I'm glad that we had Patrick on to talk a little bit about sort of how we've had a fealty to that crew for a long time. You know, we've given them a lot of room to break the law, to get bailed out, and now to have access to government and government taxpayer money in ways that they've never had before. And they've had a lot before, but this offers them even greater access. So Musk is granting himself government contracts while he meanwhile completely dismantles the rest of government. Musk to me is a truly scary figure from the standpoint of, Mr. Musk, you have no qualifications to do what you're doing, to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And you're not rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. As we've seen, he's turned AI onto many of these tasks of reviewing government competence and government production. That is to say, how productive an employee is. And AI has no clue. And you've seen it. They're getting rid of critical people. Day after day, we're reading this stuff. So I see it as a really tough spot for Elon Musk and for the American taxpayer. If you're an American citizen right now, we're in, and that's just the governmental side of things. I'm looking at the fact that there were a bunch of USDA worker, the people who are associated with reviewing how safe meat is and how safe the systems associated with your public health. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, they were all fired. Now they've had to backtrack and rehire 5,000 of them. Yeah. Again, these are the people who, oops, we've had so many examples of this. One of Mike Johnston's staffers, I think he's his chief of staff, arrested for DUI after Trump's speech. They were so excited. I guess it was a night of drinking on the Capitol grounds. This dude got into his car.
After the speech. I don't know if he was celebrating the night of the Trump speech or if he just couldn't look himself in the eye. But yeah, the chief of staff for Mike Johnston gets arrested for DUI the night of the speech.
Backed into a parked vehicle. Yeah. Well, I mean, however he worked it out, he worked it out. I'm looking at, and I've got this new system here, and I'm not crazy for it, to be honest. All my screens go dark all of a sudden. A mí no me gusta nada aquí. I don't like anything. Anyway, I turned to totally bizarre. As we were leaving this morning, there was a cat outside her apartment door, says Trevor Starr in Hollywood, lying in the doorway next to a pile of cat food. We'd love to keep them, but our 2 cats aren't happy. So weird. You think you want to go cat stories? I can match that cat story. We had 3 cats that we got from the shelter. Of course, let's forget all our, creatures. And then this black cat showed up, a little black cat. And so this little black cat shows up, and I was just getting home. It was late at night. It might have been 10:30, something like that. And this little meow I hear, and I look over, and this little black cat is emaciated. Little thing. I mean, like she didn't seem like she was full grown. So I run into the house, I get her some food, and she was so sweet. And she came up to me, but when I tried to reach out for her, she ran. And she didn't want to have human interaction. She's clearly like a street cat or something. Little thing, though. I gave her some food. And the next night, I tried quickly to find if there was a way to get her inside, because she clearly needed to be rescued. There's traffic, and there are all these coyotes, and there's so many ways that she get offed, right? So the second night, I had already pre-arranged like a litter box and like stuff in this bathroom so that I could, if I could get her into the house, coax her in, I'd be able to rescue her, right? Because I'm active with a lot of rescue groups, and so I knew that I could make sure that she'd be okay. So I come home, and it's all I'm thinking about. It's weird how I remember clearly being sort of obsessed, or preoccupied might be a better word, with hoping that I could rescue this little cat. I get home, and there's no cat. Same time, I enter through the side entrance the same way I did, nothing. And I'm closing the door, and right as the door is closing, I hear meow. I look down, and there is this sweet little thing. And we rescued her, and we named her Cash.
Oh. And that's your Cash.
Yeah.
That's
We
so
love her.
sweet.
We really love her. So, Trevor, I hope yours has a nice Hollywood ending like ours did. Our little Cash. We love her. And she's actually the most social and the most charming cat. Everybody loves her. And the other three, again, who didn't like her, we gave her her own space. So that's why, you know. But cats sort of have to work it out. Sometimes it can't work. Debbie says, listening to Patrick was like drinking from a fire hydrant. He does have a lot. I mean, I will grant you that, man. That dude, and then he's making all these references, you know, and I as a host have to go, and that's this and that's that.
Yeah.
But he usually, you know, he cites his references pretty well. Mark says, Phineas, nobody was talking about how Trump stole back the classified documents that he stole and secreted to begin with. Yeah, we will ask David Katz about that. Again, I think, sadly, it's a footnote. That was the case that they should have brought against President Trump. They should have brought that case. And that was the one that's easy to understand. It's indefensible. And yet he did what they do, which is they act defiantly. And that was what Trump did. I need to buy that coffee. I did not hear citizen. Oh, I'm seeing that. I need to try that coffee. I love coffee, says Myra R. Finch. You do, Myra.
CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Yep.
Yeah. Get on the train, Myra, and use our discount code. Use our discount code and get that 10% off on CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And there are tasting notes, so, you know, the bean that you like might not be the bean that I like, but all their stuff is amazing. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. 10% off if you use Mark T at checkout. And then this, I didn't hear Citizens United mentioned once. It was mentioned. That was what I mentioned when I was saying the Supreme Court opened the door to, you know, essentially the corporate spend and the corporate ability to buy politics. But now you're seeing it at another level. And lastly, and I'll get to David Katz, I listened to Mark Levin for a few minutes as Hannah Jepsen's comment when I was driving. He was talking about Greenland like what the people want did not matter. It was all U.S. needs it, and thus we should have it. Mark Levin has a very extreme view of the world, and it's extreme bad. Maxwell House versus Coachella Valley Coffee.
No, there is no comparison. No.
You can do that taste test, though, Rhonda. That's from Rhonda. Do that taste test and let us know how it works. That's kind of fun. All right, we continue.
The Mark Thompson Show.
There is, for my money, no one better to talk about the law and to provide legal analysis across the English-speaking world. You can hear him on London radio. What did he was just on something else. What was it, Kim? He was just on
Fox in D.C.
Oh, yeah, Fox
Yeah,
and DC.
he was good, too.
Matt, we have that, David Katz on Fox. Did I give that to you?
I will grab it right now.
Okay, great. I will share that before our time with David Katz ends. Anyway, across the English-speaking world, he's a coveted legal analyst. He comes with us on Thursday for a little while to take us through the craziness of the law and the lawlessness that is all in, sadly, great supply. How about it for David Katz, everybody? He's the former federal prosecutor. Now he's defense attorney, David Katz.
Great to be with you.
Yeah. David, the Supreme Court has been active, and most of the activity has related to these moves, aggressive as they are, by the Trump administration. The latest Supreme Court judgment, maybe you can put it into some context for us, seem to suggest that this freezing of funds, the USAID relief funds that Trump wants and the Trump administration has, enacted, they've enacted the freeze already. They can't do that according to the court, or can they? What is the court saying?
Well, actually, I've emphasized the fact that the courts have really held, and people who say, well, the trial courts have held, think, well, these cases will go to the U.S. Supreme Court and it'll be a hard rain that's going to fall on the rule of law. But so far, that's not true, Mark. So far, the Supreme Court has held too. And in this latest decision, it was just an unsigned order, but still 5-4. The Trump administration lost. That can't be lost in the analysis. The Trump administration lost because they didn't have the votes of Chief Justice Roberts and they didn't have the vote of Amy Coney Barrett. And if they stick with 5 votes that are for the rule of law and that are not going to rubber stamp the Trump administration, we're in good shape. This particular one had to do with spending money. And I think it's going to be very clear that the impoundment law is not going to be monkeyed with. And therefore, the president cannot impound money appropriated by Congress. And
again, explain it. Impoundment means stop.
Even though Congress may not be standing up for itself, the Supreme Court's going to stand up for that because that's in the separation of powers. The money was allocated, and therefore it can't be impounded or held back by the administration. And so a lot of what Trump is doing, so many of these things that Trump is doing, is causing harm, and some of the harm will be irreparable for the employees of the federal government, and it'll be irreparable for the people who need government services like you and me and everyone else. But at least constitutionally, the Supreme Court, I think, will get it right.
So as more and more then is served up to the Supreme Court, you're seeing setbacks for the administration agenda. I'm wondering if that extends to the discharging of so many federal employees.
Well, the probationary employees are probably, as a practical matter, gone. I think any of these federal employees, probationary or not, Mark, if they want to challenge and can do it through their union or otherwise afford to pay for lawyers, I think that a lot of them are going to win in front of these civil service boards. Even with Trump's lackeys in there, I think they're going to still win. I think some of those boards are going to hold because the law is so clear. But the probationary employees have less due process rights. So as a practical matter, they're going to be having trouble getting lawyers that are going to take the case on a contingency. If they don't have unions defending them, there'll be nobody to go to bat for them like a union, and they'll just find other jobs. So many of them are so talented, they don't need this federal job. We need them. Yeah. And I think it was a pity that Biden didn't see this coming, or maybe without having the House on his side, he couldn't do anything about seeing this coming. But certainly the chess move would have been to limit the time that probationary employees were on probation, or to make some of them non-probationary employees sooner. Because what's actually going to happen with these probationary employees is that from Trump's point of view, they're Biden people. They were selected in the last year, let's say, and they'll get rid of them. They'll go their separate way. And guess what? Those jobs are not going to be canceled. What we're going to actually see is Trump filling them. Trump's going to try to fill them with loyalists. He's going to try to fill them with people he likes. And he figures that the people he's going to get are going to be more to his liking than the probationary employees that Biden got. Think about it. Whenever you think, what sneaky power grabbing thing is Trump going to do? That's what he's going to do. Don't indulge yourself that there's some great mystery. Any way that he and Musk can grab power, punish enemies, get people more to their liking, that's what's going to be done by them if the courts and the public don't stop them.
And there's no real legal stop to the ways in which this unelected, unconfirmed guy who just happens to be wealthy and obviously has donated a bunch of that wealth to getting this president elected. I understand his alliance with Trump, but there's no way to block the participation of these other 19 to 26-year-olds. There's quite a fleet of them now in Washington who are involved in all of these major government institutions and dismantling them. There's no real legal block to that, David?
Well, as I understand it, Musk is the world's richest man. Now he's about the second or third richest man, only for 3 reasons. One is because people used to buy Teslas. They're not buying them anymore. He lost over $100 billion in the last month or two just on Tesla stock. The second reason that he's rich is because he's charmed people that we need to go to Mars, and the government spends this huge amount subsidizing SpaceX. My opinion, we don't need to go to Mars. The public should stop spending on this. I don't want to see people on Medicaid not getting health care, people not getting food in America, so that we can have this pipe dream of going to Mars, and that will slash and destroy Musk's fortune. And on top of that, there's Twitter, which people are using less and less and has less and less credibility. So don't bet on Musk staying all that rich all that long. But he figures as long as he battles this, Mark, as long as he intimidates federal employees, that's what this is all about. This is so that they flinch before they investigate something righteous that Musk has done. So they think, oh my God, I could lose my job, no matter how egregious what Musk just did, no matter how many defects there may be in a Tesla, no matter how much this SpaceX is landing in violation of environmental laws, no matter how much X is violating people's rights, they'll flinch at doing something about it. The Europeans don't. The Europeans investigate all those things vigorously. America hasn't so much, and Musk hopes they'll do it a lot less. Trump thinks the same thing. Why is he doing what he's doing on crypto, Mark? He's doing it because he wants to get fat and rich, Trump, on crypto, and not have people say, this emperor of your crypto has no clothes. So he's hoping to do that. Now there's going to be a crypto reserve. It's beyond belief. Like petroleum we need. Crypto, this is nothing but a slash and grab money. Anyway, when you turn to why is he, what the courts are doing, what the plaintiffs are doing, since Trump gave the joint address to Congress, where he had Musk stand up and he said he runs Doge, that's a pretty good piece of evidence. The president saying Musk runs Doge. So they've all gone back and filed supplemental briefs in these courts where the government has tried to, the Trump administration has tried to dodge who's the head of Doge. And the reality is that there's no dodging it anymore. There's no playing fast and loose with the courts. The courts are getting the fact that he's in charge of Doge. Why does he want to be officially in charge of Doge? Because they don't get sued along with Doge in his personal capacity. Musk doesn't want to be sued any more than he has to. So they've done this elaborate dance, which is falling apart. And so I think that that kind of answers your question, that they've gotten, they've gotten away with this for a little while, but they're getting away with it less and less every day. Yes. Are they hurting the public? Yes. Are measles breaking out in this country because of their negligence? Yes. A lot of awful things are happening, but at least constitutionally, legally, the tide has really turned against Trump.
I want you just to double back and put a fine point on the evidence and the Doge head thing, because there are court cases now, you're saying, in the pipeline, in the courts, talking about the legality of what Doge is doing, and then holding those people who are associated with Doge, certainly the guy running Doge, responsible for that illegality. Can you just explain why it's important to understand who is, why they're trying to carve Musk out of Doge on one level, and then yet, of course, Trump is acknowledging what we all acknowledge, and is the fact, which is that Musk is running Doge?
Well, number one, Musk doesn't want to be sued individually. He's a very rich person. There would be punitive damages in a lot of these cases.
So he'd be sued for wrongful terminations that he produced?
He violated the Privacy Act, allegedly, by taking our records out of Treasury computers, by taking our records out of IRS. There's all kinds of statutory penalties, and there's also punitive damages. And when you get to the issue of punitive damages, where somebody does wrong, where the regulations are completely clear that you're not allowed to go into this or that database, and he had his minions go into those databases, and believe me, they'll turn over in a second. None of these young guys want to go to prison. None of these guys are going to walk the plank for Musk at the end of the day. He can pay for great lawyers, whatever he wants to do. As soon as it's clear that some federal judge gets it and says, Mr. 22-year-old whiz kid, you're on your way to prison. Now, the issue is, if you want to cooperate with the government, who told you to do those things? They'll say, Musk told me on such and such a date, he sent me an email, he did this, he did that. And so Musk would be liable for punitive damages. And then the question is, what would punish somebody like Musk? It could be in the billions of dollars. You got to remember this too. Remember Trump, there was an issue, what would punish Trump with for punitive damages, both when he was sued in New York civilly and when E. Jean Carroll sued him. And the answer both times was hundreds of millions of dollars. That's for Trump. What do you think the punitive damages would be for Musk? So Musk is enjoying this game as long as he thinks it's getting him rich. As soon as he realized that he could be devastated economically, he'd probably get out of this whole thing and figure, you know what? I intimidated federal employees as much as I could. Now some federal judges are going to look at what really happened, and I'm going to be punished appropriately, including with punitive damages. So I think he'll lose his taste for this. But for now, there's this mystery whether he's even involved. And, you can't have people who don't. It's the appointments clause. The courts have been very slow to understand that there's an appointments clause, and anyone who has this kind of major power of running a federal agency has to be approved by Congress. Congress has abdicated. These Republican senators are not saying, hey, wait a second, you're infringing on our prerogatives. Why the Senate Republicans are not doing that, especially the ones who aren't facing the electorate for 4 or 6 years. I get why the ones in 2 years. This Joni Ernst, she's so scared of Trump. This senator's peeing in her pants, thinking about a year and a half, what's going to happen to her. Joni Ernst, she says she's the big heroine of women in the service. Oh my goodness, it's so touching. And then Hegseth shows up, a serial alleged abuser of women, and she falls right in line because she's scared of the electorate in Iowa. It's pathetic. But why don't these Republican senators stand up, especially the ones who aren't facing the electorate until 4 or 6 years from now? And I got to say one other thing. You would think they would want to have good relations in Canada. Look at the red states. So many of them border Canada. Canada will hate and revile these Republican senators until death do they part. These Canadians are so furious, and so rightly so. They've done nothing wrong. They're not allowing a bunch of fentanyl to come into the country under any construction. They're our greatest ally. They share this huge border with us, and they're being attacked over and over again. And these Republican senators who share a border with them are doing nothing.
What about this banking thing? You mentioned Canada, this banking thing that Trump is doing. He's doing a dance around American banks that are not allowed to operate in Canada, and therefore he wants to outlaw Canadian banks in America. I mean, I don't know much about and I always look at everything that he says as probably a lie. I mean, you can pretty much count on it not being true. But does the president have this power over American banking policy of that sort?
Well, there were 2 knocks on hanging judges. One is that hanging judges are hanging judges because they just really like to hang people. And the second one is that, no, they're really craven and they want to be known as hanging judges so they can not hang somebody if they're a friend or, they make a payoff. And that's sort of a theory about hanging judges coming from a criminal defense attorney. So why does Trump want to be a hanging president? So he can, stay the execution for somebody who ponies up a lot of money. Wow. So I assume that all of this is to get money out of these Canadian banks because you take something like TD Bank. TD Bank is an enormous bank. It's all over the East Coast in U.S. cities. And so the idea that he's really going to exclude TD Bank, I mean, at some point, these have to be threats. The economy is already doing badly enough, Mark, but we're going to go into a serious recession. If you have the tariffs and they stay in place, in Mexico, Canada, China at the rate that they are, you have these exclusions of banks. What it does is it decreases competition, prices go up, you have to pay more for these goods. Okay, that's what the consumers do. What's likely going to happen with tariffs is that people will get less and they'll pay more. The consumer in America will lose all around, and some American manufacturers will make a lot of money because their inferior products will be bought because the superior product from abroad now has a tariff that makes it make sense to accept because of the price differential, an inferior product. This happened all over Latin America. I was in Argentina. I had a tennis ball. It kept bouncing crazy. Why did the tennis ball bounce crazy in Argentina? Because they put so much tariff on, Wilson tennis balls that you would buy an Argentinian tennis ball. I'm sure by now they bounce correctly, but when I was there, they bounced crazy. An Argentinian tennis ball.
As Donald Trump, the new president and my Lord and Savior, entered the halls of Congress to give his address, he stopped while he was shaking hands and acknowledging people and thanked a Supreme Court justice. Here is that video. Take a look, David.
Thank you again. Won't forget. So good. Thank you again. Thank you again. Won't forget.
the justice that gave him immunity, John Roberts.
So good.
I wonder if you can just, I mean, in a way, maybe that's not the most damning piece of video. He's just thanking the Supreme Court for backing him up. But on the other hand, that was the decision that has opened the door to, I think, him really feeling as though the law can't touch him.
I think he was right in front of Chief Justice Roberts when he made that comment, I think. And
Right.
Mark, I don't want to get you demonetized, and I don't have that great a singing voice, so I won't sing Unforgettable. But I think that Chief Justice Roberts is going to be known as unforgettable by people who are very skeptical of his decisions. Now, in general, I like Chief Justice Roberts because, thank God, his vote saved Obamacare, and his vote that he just cast along with Barrett made it 5-4. So I'm never giving up. Excuse me. I'm never giving up on Chief Justice Roberts. And, the other thing is that Trump's going to say what he's going to say. You know what I mean? It wasn't like Chief Justice Roberts connived in him saying that. Does Trump think of everything in those personal terms? How does it affect me? Of course. And that's exactly, I think, what he meant. I won't forget. I'll do something for you. Don't worry. Cash Patel won't go after you. My IRS commissioner won't take a look at your tax returns, Chief Justice Roberts. I think that's exactly how he meant it. Totally craven, Trump. But what's Chief Justice Roberts supposed to say when he makes a remark like that? And thank God for hot mics.
Yeah, no, it was a wild moment. It is brought up here. I forget who brought it up. I saw it a couple of times. It was posted once that were Musk to be exposed legally in some way, that Trump has the power of pardon. But let me just say this, and then you can answer. I think what David's talking about, though, is that there's civil liability. You, in other words, there's a penalty. It's not a question. You can't pardon your way out of civil liability. Go ahead, David.
Not at all. Not at all. And you can't pardon your way out of state criminal liability. And, one of these states is going to put on their big boy pants, their big girl pants, and go after some of these offenses. You remember that the DA in New York City famously went after Trump, convicted Trump. Trump stands convicted of 34 state felonies as he occupies the presidency. And so there's no reason why many of Musk's crimes couldn't allegedly, at least, be state crimes. And so there'd be no presidential pardon from a state crime, and there can be no presidential pardon of any sort for a federal judgment. So if he had to pay $5 billion, then Musk would say, I think, wow, this really, intimidated a few employees. I mean, to me, it's so incredible because if you look at all the actions that were taken against him, they weren't worth this. This is why a really smart business person would not have made this calculation. He's not the first really rich person who thought, why don't I put on this kind of clown show where I become co-president? Sure, there weren't a lot of people who wanted to have someone like Musk as their co-president, but I don't think there were many people. You look at the famous, really, really rich people, certainly Rockefeller, some of the Rockefellers were very rich, but you didn't see David Rockefeller when he was head of Chase becoming co-president. Why? It just doesn't make much sense. Get along with both parties. The business person who really has acumen, a businesswoman, decides, get along. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. My God, has Musk put all of his eggs in one basket.
Well, I mean, if you, just to extend this general conspiracy notion, which I think, and as I always say, conspiracy theories, just because it's a conspiracy theory doesn't mean that there's not really a conspiracy. I think that the idea somehow that there might be control over the vote, or that there is enough momentum behind this administration, again, not all the country, not even half the country, but enough of the country that Musk may feel a bit untouchable right now. He's certainly got a tremendous amount of power. I think Trump feels untouchable, and I don't know what the situation is going to be in 2 years with the midterms or beyond, but I think these guys have plans that go well beyond what's happening now. And in the short term, all I'd say is that Musk is enriching himself so substantially. I mean, he's jacked that government contract from Verizon. He's increased the amount of money that existing government contracts are giving him. He's got that ridiculous Mars program. The only thing I'll say about the Mars program is, on the back of what you said about it, is it's ridiculous. It's really like saying, I'm going to build a ladder to Mars, and I want you to give me government contracts to help build this ladder. It's a special high-tech ladder. We call it a ladder, but it's actually something, there's a lot of complex stuff here you probably wouldn't understand. But the point is, the goal is to get to Mars on this ladder, because there's the same chance, if I were to build a ladder to Mars, of getting to Mars, that there is of sending a manned mission to Mars. The radiation associated with that, the inhabitability of Mars is extraordinary. It is an absurd notion that you would populate Mars or set up some kind of situation in Mars where you could actually live. And what it is hundreds of billions of dollars that are just dumped on this rich guy. And now he's just able to siphon off those tax dollars and increase that amount. So that's what's happening with this Mars crap. And yet, because we were all into sci-fi and we just love the idea of going to Mars, and we've loved it for so many decades, that when it's called out before Congress in a Trumpian speech, we all see everybody applauds and go, yeah, that's right, we're going to go to Mars. This is so exciting. These guys are really dreamers.
Well, the Republicans there, the Congress and the Senate, they applauded for everything. I mean, it was like a MAGA rally.
Yeah.
And some of the things really made no sense. His 5-minute riff on Social Security was terrible. His speechwriters, from his own point of view, his own speechwriters should have been fired. If anyone didn't persuade, I mean, there's 150-year-old people, and then he names them like there's real people. It's a way that they did the computer so that they would sort of not be sent checks. There's no billions of dollars of Social Security checks, Mark, that are being sent out. But
of course
what is the narrative there? The narrative there is to blast Social Security. If you say people are getting Social Security and they're old and they need the money, people are going to go, yeah. So you've got to say something if you're getting ready to cut back Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So what you say is it's all full of thieves. There's all this thievery going on. There's all kinds of incompetence going on. And it's just utterly untrue. But people should beware, Mark, that that's where we're going next. And when he starts to go there, people are even getting a hint. As it is now, Republican Congress members can't hold town halls because people show up, Republicans, people who voted for Trump, and they say he promised he wasn't going to mess around with my Social Security, my Medicare, and my Medicaid. And now it looks like he is. What, to line Musk's pocket for this insanity to go to Mars, all of this government spending on that and not on my Social Security, which, by the way, I paid into, not on my Medicare and my Medicaid that I need. And then it's all going to fall apart. People say, when is the Trump bubble going to burst? That's when the Trump bubble is going to burst. He didn't go there during the first term, but now he just has that. Oh my God, is it hubris? This is the Greek god falls, right? This is the Greek god falls because of hubris. Now he thinks he can get away with anything, no guardrails. And you could watch it day after day. He gets less popular in the polls. Republicans are going to start to run away from him, especially members of Congress, because that is a third rail. You touch Medicare and Social Security, that's a third rail. And he's got a lot of older voters who receive both Medicare and Social Security. They'll abandon him in droves. And of course, they want to close these offices, and they're going to stop answering the phone. So you don't get, some poor old person doesn't get their Social Security check. They want to go to their office. They're talking about closing these federal offices around the country, so you can't go there. Then you pick up the phone, and there's no one to answer the phone. So what do? Starve? You call up your relatives and say, please, can you bail me out? If you have a relative who'll bail you out, you just lost that person's vote. You lost the vote of everyone in their family. They're not going to vote over whether the Democrats supposedly are okay with people who were born male competing in female sports. That's going to be way down the list. And the minute they miss a Social Security check and can't get it, or miss Medicare, not allowed to visit, his popularity will tank. And apparently he doesn't care. He's figured he'll make himself as rich as he can. He doesn't have another term. Everyone thinks, oh, somehow he'll get a constitutional amendment. No, he won't. He figures this is it. This is last chance to steal. 3.5 years.
Again, I know the election thing is a whole different question as to how long he's in power. But I would say that the Social Security thing has already happened. What you're talking about, what David Katz is speaking of, has already happened. He's made cuts to Social Security, which may be, along with the IRS, one of, if not the most efficient government agency in Washington, the Social Security Administration. They have made cuts that will, according to Social Security directors and those who are at the top levels of the Social Security Administration, they will affect people's ability to get checks on time. and to be provided service. And they are closing offices nationwide. They're canceling leases nationwide at Social Security. So the reason that, as David Katz noted, Donald Trump spent so much time on Social Security, 5 minutes he spent with those lie after lie about people getting checks and they're 130 years old, 300 years old, 200 years old. Why would he pursue that when we know it's been so widely debunked? I've debunked it here day after day after day. The reason is what David Katz is saying. He is targeting the privatization of Social Security. We, again, as you say, may not see it because there'll be so much pushback, but already they have diminished Social Security's ability to serve the public, David Katz. It's already happened because of cuts at the agency.
The other thing, too, is that because of fear of the electorate, I mean, Trump, is doing a lot of reckless things, but I think he's trying to not have his approval rating drop to 30 or 35%, because if you get there, you really can't rule. I don't care. You have the Congress, you have the Senate. If you're at 30% in the polls, you can't rule. Everyone's making fun of you. Everybody's emboldened to treat you like a clown, like an idiot. He doesn't want to get to 30%. So what he'll try to do, I think, is keep the Social Security checks going out to the old people. It's the younger and middle-aged people who are listening to your show who should really be worried, because you're paying in and he's taking no provisions to make sure that there's going to be money around for that. And, he really does spend money like a drunken sailor. That's why these probationary employees, they're not even there. The job's not going to get cut. Like I said, he's going to go find people that he likes better and hire all those people back. He's going to hire a whole bunch of people back. He hopes it's going to be like the spoils system. That's what we had before the civil service. With the winner go the spoils. And you hired a whole bunch of people, smart, stupid. Who cares if they were stupid, right? They were on your side and they got hired for federal jobs. And so that's what I think Trump is going to do. He's going to spend loads and loads of money while he's cutting all these agencies back, like USAID. AIDS. He is spending more money on the Pentagon. The Pentagon apparently is completely immune from this cross-cutting thing. He's just spend. This is all Trump does. And the Republicans used to be the old guys who said, yeah, you Democrats, great idea, we can't afford it. They used to be great idea, we can't afford it. Now, of course, they think every Democratic idea is a terrible idea, and then they spend more money than the Democrats do in their wildest spending spree. So this is unsustainable, Mark. Let me say one thing about the IRS.
Let me just make a fine point, then I'll get to the IRS, and that is what David's saying. I mean, across the Potomac, you have the gold medalists, the perennial gold medalists of waste, fraud, and abuse. They are the Pentagon. There is no institution or agency in Washington that is even a close second place. And yet they're going to give them more money while they axe these efficient, terrific institutions that really aren't part of this fraud, waste, and abuse that they're claiming they're going after. Now, please talk about the IRS.
So, Mark, you have such wonderful guests on and diverse. I don't know if you have anyone this diverse that they stand up for the IRS. I am going to do the stand up for the IRS as a federal criminal defense attorney who's often fighting with the IRS because I represent clients who are under, criminal audit, criminal investigation. But, I have my disagreements with them, but they're hardworking. They're conscientious. They have all of these rules. The idea that they're sort of just like out there, they document everything they do. They keep careful ledgers. They have supervisors. They have all kinds of guardrails to make sure the IRS is run properly. And every one of them that's fired was bringing in 12 or 15 times their salary, Mark. So if you are trying to actually save money, there's two, and he says he's going to balance the budget. Trump says he's going to balance the budget. You just shake your head when the Republicans get up there. Nothing about what he's doing is going to get him anywhere near balancing the budget. Clinton, who they don't like, of course, balanced the budget. But the two things that you would do, you would increase the IRS so they could collect more money, including from a bunch of huge tax cheats, and like very, very rich people and big corporations. I usually represent small business people, but the ones that I'm talking about, the huge corporations that pay almost nothing. And you need an army of IRS agents to figure out what their accounting tricks are and to get the money back for the people. And the second thing you do is you'd have lots and lots of inspectors general. And this will get through to the general public, even the Republican voters, that you don't cut fraud, waste, and abuse by getting rid of the people who cut fraud, waste, and abuse, who are the inspectors general who Trump has axed across the board.
Yeah. I mean, they'll call them corrupt or they'll call them whatever, but that's exactly
There's no
right.
evidence.
Of course not. But I mean, there's no evidence for, a lot of what they say. And it is true that, you don't get rid of the cop on the beat if you're really serious about crime. And on the IRS, I mean, that's where all your revenue is coming from, as you say, David. I mean, if if you're serious about this budget, if you're really serious at all about budget, that's where your revenue comes from. And as we've said over and over, I mean, if you simply inched up a little bit of the number of people, you hire more people for the white collar criminals. That's the division where there is a ton of money. And of course, that was for the first division to be cut under the first Trump administration, and now under this administration as well. And that was a bone thrown to his rich billionaire buddies. I wanted to ask you about something that has nothing to do with what we've been speaking of so far, but the Supreme Court agreed with you can characterize San Francisco as liberal, I think, fairly. But just this week, their federal regulators, they said in their decision from the Supreme Court, had overstepped their authority by trying to impose vague limits, they said, on how much raw sewage in San Francisco can get pumped into the Pacific Ocean. So this is something that's going on in San Francisco. And Alito, again, conservative justice, wrote in the opinion, it was a 5-4 majority, that the EPA was overstepping its boundaries by policing water quality standards, and that San Francisco can dump this raw sewage into the Pacific Ocean. I saw it as a real sad moment, because all this stuff that has to do with the EPA just saddens me. I mean, they're really just taking the teeth out of all the rulings. But I wonder if you can just speak to this judgment.
Well, I agree with the work that the EPA does. I mean, sometimes I'm sure that there are excesses. There are things that, people can say they go too far. There's certainly too much regulation. An intelligent way of cutting regulations would be so wonderful. But it seems like the Republicans often just want to slash it, even when we need it so bad. And it seems like the Democrats, sometimes they get kind of this inertia where they can't cut regulations. So I tend to be kind of in the middle of that. But no, it's very sad with the EPA, and that's what they're going to do, Mark. They're going to cut back. And I've said this before, that I think what the Supreme Court ultimately is going to do is to say that the president can remove the heads of these groups, like the EPA, like the SEC, like the FTC, even if there's a fixed term. I think they are going to say, and I don't necessarily agree with them, but I think they're going to say that with the separation of powers, Congress can set up these agencies, it can give them missions, it can fund them, but in terms of who actually leads them, whether they set a term or not, that is a presidential prerogative to remove that person. One of the really interesting cases, Mark, which just came down, if I can spend a minute on it, this is this fellow, Dellinger. Dellinger is the head of this Office of Special Counsel, which is not Jack Smith. It's not Robert Mueller. It's a whistleblower group set up by Carter, approved by Congress, approved ever since then by Congress. And this person is supposed to make sure that if you're a federal whistleblower, you don't get fired on some pretext. To figure out whether you're really a whistleblower, and if you are really a whistleblower, make sure that you're not punished. Also, he manages something called the Merit Protections Board. That question went up to the US Supreme Court on an emergency basis. And I know for people who aren't lawyers, but trial courts decide something. If you really think that what the trial court's done is wrong, you can run to the appellate courts. But usually the appellate courts say, it's not that much of an emergency. Come back from a clearer ruling or a later ruling. In this instance, the district judge kept him in the job, even though Trump purported to fire him without cause, just because he didn't like him. He wasn't a guy that he liked. Trump wanted to get rid of him, term or no term. This case went to the US Supreme Court, and they said it's not a true emergency. It went back to the trial court, and the trial court said, on a permanent basis, I'm going to leave you in that office. Not just temporarily. I'm going to leave you, Dellinger, in that office. You're the head of an independent agency, and the president cannot remove you. After she ruled that, I think it was a she, it went up to the DC Circuit Court of Appeals because it was going back up. It went up to the US Supreme Court as an emergency, and then it went back up as a preliminary injunction. The DC Circuit Court of Appeals ruled against him. and said, no, the district court would have permanently kept you in your job until further ruling. We do not agree with that. We're ousting you. And then it was teed up to go to the Supreme Court again. He, I think, wisely resigned. I think he decided that he did not want that to be the trial, to be the case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it maybe made terrible precedent for 100 years. He might have made good precedent, but I think he said, you know what, there's other jobs I can do, there's other things I can do, and he resigned. And I think that was not, some people may look at that as, kind of caving in, but I think he played out the string as long as he could. While he was still in office, kept by the judge, he did some wonderful things, like get this merit selection board looking into thousands of cases of people who got dismissed by Trump who shouldn't have been. And then he's going to go, that's what's amazing. All these people who supposedly corrupt, or they're bubs, or they waste time, they go and get jobs making 5 times as much because they're so competent, they're so good, especially the ones who are lawyers, always turn around and make quite a bit more money. They're actually sacrificing. People out there can say what they want to say. They are sacrificing by having those government jobs. You take Ali Mayorkas, my old friend, who was impeached. They made up so much stuff about Ali Mayorkas. He made so much more money before he went to the government. He's going to make so much money after he leaves the government. The U.S. attorney out here was making a couple of $1 million a year as a tremendous trial lawyer when he went to be the U.S. attorney here in Los Angeles. So it's just,
well, let me ask you about Mayorkas. I don't mean to put, this is fascinating to me.
Wants to say, right?
Yeah, this is fascinating to me. Let me just ask you about Mayorkas because I've got you here, and
Okay.
It's intriguing to me. I mean, he did give Jeffrey Epstein a sweetheart deal, didn't he? I mean, just plain and simple.
No, he's not the one. No,
Oh,
that
who
was
was it? Who was it?
That was a different cabinet member. No, Mayorkas didn't give Epstein any kind of sweetheart deal. Mayorkas was the U.S. attorney in Los Angeles. Then he was the deputy Homeland Security under Obama, and then he was the head of Homeland Security.
Okay.
People will remember as they got on a flight because he was head of. He had his picture. He was saying he had a little video there at every airport where he said, "Hi, I'm Alejandro Mayorkas, the head of Department of Homeland Security." But it was another guy. It was not
different. It was a guy from Florida.
was
Somebody can help me with that. I don't in the chat. Somebody knows. But,
he was a Trumpy. He was a Trumpy official from the first time around who had to resign. He'd been the U.S. attorney down in the Southern District of Florida,
right.
who gave a sweetheart deal to Epstein during
Thank
one
you.
of the.
That's it. I thought it was Mayorkas.
First
The Epstein case docs announced with. I knew they'd be the minute they made a big deal out of it. I knew it was going to be a nothing because that's what they do. They've redacted it. There was no new information what wasn't already into the public sphere. Give me a moment on the Epstein case docs and also MLK and JFK. I think they all fall in the same category. It's all show and no go.
Well, I think RFK Jr. Likes this because somehow it makes his uncle even more of a martyr. His uncle's a martyr and a great man in my book, and I don't need RFK Jr. to go muck around. He ought to deal with measles. If he wants to do something useful, he ought to deal with this measles outbreak and everything else. When they cut that money back for USAID, all that money is going to be restored. But of course, they made so much havoc, so much chaos before it gets restored. The people at USAID, I think, are going to come out okay. It's us who aren't going to come out okay. It's
right.
Our money that bought those goods that Trump allowed to rot. He allowed those warlords to steal it. That was on us. But the people who worked at USAID, they're going to get their back pay. They're probably going to get their back pay with something else. This was completely ineffective, what he was trying to do there. But, I was on that show on Fox. And if you'd like to, I'll take 30 seconds to talk about Fox. My old friend Adam Schiff said, I think he was on Bill Maher, but he said it other places too a couple of years ago. He said, if Fox invites you, go on, tell your side of the story. Let them ask their questions. Let them tell their side of the story, but tell your side of the story. People who watch Fox are not unreachable. I know loads of people like that. I have relatives like that. I mean, we're not as polarized. Fox tries to polarize us, but the country is not that polarized. So I did a show about 2 hours before the joint address, and I hope you were going to play that.
Yeah, that's this is what he's playing right now, Matt, is we can listen to a little bit if you
very
want.
poorly. And today is the day that the tariffs kick in for Mexico and Canada. Both of them are putting retaliatory tariffs, and prices are going to zoom up, which is not, it seems, what people voted for. And of course, the Democrats will point out that prices are going to zoom because of the tariffs and because of the other policies that are being pursued by Trump, who said he would cut prices.
Gotcha. Is this event tonight? Do we see presidents often do this early in their during their presidency?
Well, it comes around, the State of the Union. And of course, there's not much of a State of the Union of a year's duration, which is normally what you have.
Okay.
But here he's talking about the 6 or 7 weeks that he's been there. And certainly there's been a lot of hyperactivity. I think there'll also be a lot of criticism about Musk. They'll call him the co-president. They'll say it really should have been him up there speaking. He's the one who's cut back these government agencies, and he's the one who's gotten into all of these computers. The courts have ruled in over 95% of the cases against Trump. And these are Democratic, but also Republican appointed judges. So there's been an awful lot of turmoil, and I think Trump's popularity is going down. He'll try to boost it. And of course, the Republicans in the chamber will be applauding wildly. But, the fact that it'll look like a MAGA rally doesn't mean it's popular with anybody but the intense MAGA crowd. He doesn't seem to have reached across the aisle and done anything that's popular nationwide, that's popular with the other party. He's just hunkering down with his MAGA base.
All right, that's good stuff. That's our David Katz on
Percent.
WTTG in Washington. That was my station growing up. I grew up in Washington, D.C. Katz was there with those anchors. Anchors are very, laid back. Guy, scratching his beard while he's talking to you. He's kind of hanging out. Just tell us, David, what do you think's going to happen tonight? It's like a very... I always liked my anchors in Washington. There was an anchor when I was growing up named Jim Vance.
Yes,
he used to wear the colors, the African colors, on the air. I loved it. I thought it was the coolest thing. He'd wear this like a beanie. This is an anchor doing this. This is during the Civil Rights Movement, so it didn't seem weird at all. And he was like the coolest, hippest. I think he had a coke problem later in life and stuff. And then he became like the grand old man. You know what I mean? And Jim Vance, he was on WRC, the NBC station, but WTTG, they were Channel 5, and they still are. I really loved them. And now they're Fox O&O.
Mark, the local Fox people there have been great. They have me on quite a bit, and they have a really nice vibe. And they hear my side of the story. You cut before she said to me, well, didn't people vote for this? I mean, she's sort of standing up for, their what side of the story. But when she says, didn't people vote for that? Then I had a chance to come back and say, no, they really didn't. Maybe they voted for tailoring the government, but who voted for chaos, firing all these people, firing every probationary employee, whether they were terrific or not? Who voted for any of that? So, we had a chance to have a nice interchange. And the other thing is, of course, you couldn't have a city where these cuts are less popular than D.C. I mean, they have a DC audience, and Virginia and Maryland, and they've been devastated. I mean, the economic harm to that area has been so profound with all these cuts.
The real estate market in DC is in a free fall right now because of this. It's
only 20%. Only 20% of the employees are in DC, but still, that's a lot of people. DC, half the people work for the government. I don't think that's unfair to say in the DC metropolitan area. It's about half the people. 80% are outside of Washington, D.C., and they're all the ones that we're talking about right now, too. The Forest Service, you can't go to the national parks. They're going to close national parks this summer. Talk about make America great again. What's something great about this country that pops into your mind? Yosemite, Yellowstone, these national parks all over the country that are going to be closed to people, to families that want to go there this summer. And then it just goes on and on. And all the medical things that are being cut, 1/10 or more than that at the VA. Who voted to cut the VA? They need more care, the vets. I thought Trump was supposed to be for the vets. They're cutting the VA tremendously.
Yeah, and they can only demonize so many agencies at one time. They're trying to demonize Social Security by making up that stuff about how 130-year-olds and 300-year-olds are getting checks. It's total, BS. They can talk about inefficiencies, but there certainly aren't these inefficiencies at all these agencies, and you're not addressing them when you go in with a meat cleaver and cut these agencies up. It's a brutal period right now in Washington. It's interesting that you were on Washington television. It was Alexander Acosta who was the guy who was with the Epstein judgment. And the Justice Department actually said that Acosta used a poor judgment, is what they said, in giving Epstein a plea deal out of Florida. That was, and then Acosta went on to be part of the first Trump administration. That was who I was thinking of. I have to let David Katz go, and not in the way that government employees are being let go, but just in the way that we have to say goodbye. Trump has admitted his policies will cause, quote, a little hurt or something to that effect, says John Watson. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's going to cover it, the kind of hurt that we're looking at, it seems more than just a little.
By the way, let me say hello to Kim. I watch the show from time to time, and Kim, I enjoyed your comments the other day. So how you doing there?
I don't remember what I said, but I will say what Trump is.
I think that you were mortified by what's happening with the government, just shocked that this could happen. How could there be this rapid change? And it's absolutely appalling. And you hope that that Congress would do something, and the Democrats don't have any power. And like I said, the Republican senators, even when it involves their neighboring country of Canada, they just are completely. Used to have the ding, pusillanimous. How's that, Mark?
There you go. The Mark Thompson show, Ren is asking, can you ask David about the idea that the president is an agent of our enemy? Was that for David Katz or David K. Johnston, I wonder? I mean, I don't know about whether David really, you have a view. Of course, now in your new established role as a political strategist and commentator, maybe you want to, that's a, here's the one thing.
All I would say was this: Trump is not enforcing the Foreign Registration Act, the FARA. So if somebody is an agent for a foreign government, there used to be very stringent requirements that they reported, and now he's cutting that back. How is it the national interest to cut back the required reporting of someone who's a foreign agent? Of course, what they do is they write an editorial and they say it's in the government's best interest. It's in the people of America's best interest. And the reality is they've been paid $100,000 by the Turkish government to write that editorial. And you have a right to know that. Then you can say, okay, this guy took $100,000 from Turkey. He thinks we should do something that really helps Turkey. He's got some good arguments, and I can accept him or not, but you ought to have a right to know who's a foreign agent, who's a lobbyist. He's cut back on that. So, but don't get me started on what's happening with Ukraine. I'm an old school. I'm with Reagan on this one. I'm not with Trump on this one at all.
Well, I mean, I don't know who is with Trump. It's I understand his paid toadies are with him, but otherwise I just don't get this. And I understand also how they've sold this notion that we're, spending all this money and we've got to keep the money here. But it's to see Europe on the brink of an expansion of this theater of war is scary. And to hear so many world leaders talking in the way they are, I think what you have in this administration is an inability, certainly an inability on the part of Trump's part. I think it's more than disregard. I think it's an inability to understand the fragility of the entire situation in Europe and how America's presence has bolstered the kind of peace that we've had for all these decades in Europe, I'm talking about. So this is an insanely destabilizing thing that we're seeing in Washington, and it's really, really scary. Great to be with you, David, and I look forward to next week. And you can find David across all these media outlets. You're very much in demand, sir. So
I'm on in New York City. You talk about the stations you grew up with. I'm on with the stations in New York City that I grew up watching when I was a kid. Although, truth be told, I didn't watch that much TV. I read books. Remember that?
Oh yeah, that was great.
My dad said, turn off the idiot box.
Yeah, and now you have a Netflix series. No more books.
I resist that. I love reading. I'm one of those guys. My dad said, turn off the idiot box, read a book.
Well, that's why you're a smarty. I'll talk to you soon, David Katz, everybody. Bye, David. Right on. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
We love talking to David Katz. It can sometimes, it takes us into the next hour. Trevor Starr with an update on the cat. Kitty update. My daughter found a home for him with one of her friends. That's sweet. Trevor Starr in Hollywood. So it does have a happy Hollywood ending for now. Yeah, what about that woman who was claimed to be the head of Doge, says Tammy? Is she a patsy? The answer is yes, she's a plant.
The lady who was on vacay in South America?
Yeah, who didn't even know she was head of Doge.
She's like,
oh, yeah,
really?
yeah. Here's what you're going to do. Yeah, we're telling everybody you're the head of Doge.
Thank you.
Yeah. The super sticker from Joan Hollywood. What a cool last name.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know if that's your real last name, but I like that you took it even if it's not your real last name. And a big shout out.
Shout
to
out.
you. Thank you for the super sticker. Chantel, for your cat loving, I get to the 279. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm a cat lover. I'm an animal lover, but the cats, I don't know. There's something about them really touches me. Vivian El Shawa, thank you. Super sticker for $10, and you are an OG, baby.
Big shout out.
Yeah, you're one of the originals. The Doge personnel are refusing to testify about its actions, not following a judge's order, says shadow producer Calvin Wong. I will follow up on that tomorrow. Rich says, sorry, but Hitler won his people over slowly and incrementally, just like Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Well, I think lies underpinned a lot of what Hitler did, and I think there are a lot of lies right now. I mean, I always feel weird about the Hitler comparison. I think you talk about authoritarians, you can see the similar playbook being implemented now that you've seen across the world. These are scary times for sure. Thank you, CC Router. Yeah, it was Acosta. Alexander Acosta. I had couldn't get the name. Involved in the Epstein deal originally.
I wanted to make sure that you mentioned the efforts to privatize the Postal Service and Amtrak.
Oh my God! Why don't we mention that at the beginning of the show?
Well, we were guest heavy, and so I know you really wanted to.
Producing this thing has no idea what they're doing.
Make sure we got that in there. Yeah.
God. Yes. I mean, this is what the game is. The privatization of everything. The one thing I've said over and over and over again, you can't say, if you've watched the show or listened to me on the radio, I've talked about the fact that they want to privatize everything. Everything they can, they will privatize. It's the GOP that wants to privatize. Now, you may be a GOPer, you may have been a free marketer, you might have been old school GOP, whatever your deal is, but the one consistent feature is they feel and have successfully sold this myth that private industry is more effective and efficient than is government. And the reality is that's just not true. I mean, government does a lot of things well. Look at the VA. Look at the SSA, Social Security. The Postal Service itself is a good example. I mean, the thing about the Postal Service is they handle mail and deliveries to rural communities that wouldn't be served by private industry. There's just no money in it. It's a loser. And so much of government you don't make money on. The money in government is associated with serving the public because the public pays into government. It is our government. So if you run government like a business, you're doing it wrong. And that's what they do. So much of this is, it's good to finally get some businessmen in there. They're going to finally run government the way it should be. Well, I get it. Waste, fraud, and abuse exists in private sector and in public sector. Of course, it exists in government, but it also exists in private industry. And if you've ever called your cable company, tell me how that's working out. If you've ever called a private industry on any number of things, I mean, you can almost just throw a dart at a list of businesses, try to get a hold of them with something you've been double billed on, triple billed on, the banking business. I mean, that's all private industry. Is that handled well? Are you happy with the way all that crap's gone down? You can't even get a real person on the line anymore. So the idea somehow that private industry handles things well, the Postal Service will be deep sixed. They have had a target on the Postal Service for so long. They will destroy the Postal Service as you know it. We'll pay more for the delivery of these various things that will be sent, first class letters or packages, whatever it'll be. You'll pay more for it, and you won't be able, just plain and simple, to get it delivered to a lot of these rural routes. Those rural route inhabitants will have to go to major cities or major counties or some central area that's set up to go get their package. And you're saying, well, that's not so bad. I mean, that's, no, that actually is bad. There are very important things sent through the mail that need to reach people who don't always have access to transportation or any way to get that mail. I mean, I see it as one of the great victories of the American system that the US Postal Service exists the way it does. And now with mail-in voting, there's that too. So you're going to give private industry more manipulation over our ballots and where they end up? It's awful, absolutely awful idea. And so I look to see who's suggesting an awful idea. And of course, it's the guy who is the font of awful ideas, Donald Trump and Elon Musk. I mean, Trump doesn't care. He wants to go play golf, and he wants to go to photo ops and play president. I mean, he's a performer. He's a performative guy. And a lot of that performative thing at Donald Trump has propelled him to the presidency. You know, he'll say whatever he has to say, and he says it with this fervor. He knows how to sell stuff. He's a con man. He's a salesman. And it's served him well. So the bad ideas, the dismantling of government, the privatization of Social Security and of Postal Service has been talked about, as I say, for decades by the GOP. But Musk is going to try to make it happen. And so the Postal Service is definitely in the crosshairs of this administration. There's no question about it. And apparently he's talked about this, right? Isn't that what you were telling me, Kim? He basically said, the article that I read said he wants to privatize everything. He says...
Well, Musk appeared at a tech conference in front of all the tech bros who, one wonders, are these the people that want to take over and privatize everything and make money? And Musk stood up and said, the more we privatize, the better. And that includes the post office, and that includes Amtrak. And he went on to say, in other countries, the train service is so much better and it's privatized. And that's not necessarily true, because in Europe, it's a mixture of private and governmental train service. So anyway, yeah, Musk is
And that's what we have, by the
about-
way, in this country, too. If anybody who's on the East Coast watching, you know, you jump on the Amtrak or the Arcella, whatever the Acela, I think it's called, on that East Coast corridor between Boston and Washington, D.C. and on down, and it's a mix of private and public. If you're coming from another country, please don't use our national rail, he said. It can leave you with a very bad impression of America. So I think, he said, we should prioritize anything that can be privatized. And, you know, this is a guy who...
Anything that can be privatized.
Anything can be privatized, yeah.
That includes what? So I guess you could surmise that includes Social Security, as you've been talking about.
Yeah, and he says basically, these are his remarks, his quote, basically something's got to have some chance of going bankrupt, or there's not a good feedback loop for improvement. We should try to privatize everything we possibly can, he said, and that would be my recommendation. Well, I have two things to say about bankruptcy. Bankruptcy actually inoculates you from running your company well. You're saying, let me tell you, dude, you'd be bankrupt were it not for my money. Our country, our taxpayer dollars prop you up through various credits that you sell, the government credits that you sell, and these ridiculous, the SpaceX program, which has been beneficial, not like everything Elon Musk does is bad when it comes to some of these programs. And what he did with Tesla and making the electric cars cool, I thought that was a good thing as well. But now he's just benefiting from these huge government grants and government subsidies. He's a welfare queen. And so the idea somehow that he wants to privatize things because the risk of bankruptcy will actually create efficiencies, no, it won't. Once you've declared bankruptcy, then you really don't have to be efficient. It's inoculated you from all your debt. Musk is playing the public, and it's sad, but he's been given immense power, and that's scary. You were so right, business is not governance, and governance is not business, says Bado Maji. Bado Maji, I've never read one of your comments before, but I like it. I like any comment that starts with "you are so right."
Why are you yelling?
I absolutely love more comments should start with "you are so right." Yeah, thank you, Bado or Bado Maji. Yeah. All right, I've got to wrap up around here. I'd like to stay. I really would. I didn't, even get to some stuff a lot of stuff that I wanted to get to. Tomorrow, there's
The Mark Thompson Show.
No, we're not doing Kim's news. No, please. I'm sorry.
Things
I
went a
want
little
to,
haywire
but I can't.
there.
I cannot do it.
No.
I can't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I want to do it, but I can't.
It's okay.
I'm
not upset about it.
I love my Kim so much that I'm going to turn the whole show over to her tomorrow.
Yeah, I know.
Very exciting. Our big Friday show, Friday Fabulous Florida. Michael Schur will have a bunch to talk about. Snyder, the Culture Blaster, is going to be in. We've got a lot going on. I'm contemplating a special video this weekend that I will drop ahead of a video that you'll see in the main show next week. Have an amazing lineup of people next week. A Social Security expert is coming through, expert and activist. We will lay bare so much of what happens with Social Security and the future, and how already the agency's been diminished by firings and reckless administrative changes at the Bureau and at bureaus across the country from Musk and his team. So Harry says you're so right.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Johnson Show. Bye-bye.
So there is a lot going on. Matt, you got a shout out. Great job, says Mo Direct. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everybody. Till tomorrow. Bye-bye.